This is how we exist. If you didn't have an immune system, you wouldn't make it 3 days out of the womb. Okay? You actually, out of the womb, you have some shared immunity from your mom. Your mom is giving you some help right off the bat. You share a lot of her immunity right out of the womb. She's sharing it through the umbilical cord, and you get to share what she has for about the first 3 to 6 months of life. But then you take over, and then if you don't have a whole lot, then you get in trouble. The immune system is complex. This is just skimming the system of what the immune system does. You have non-specific immunity. The non-specific immunity is clearly the majority of our immune system. The specific, get a couple over here, cellular, humoral. I'll come back to those. These are our vaccines. By the way, I got my flu shot yesterday. No pressure on any of you guys. Surface barriers, chemical secretions, mucous membrane, tears. Tears are a chemical, so when you cry, there's some enzymatic activity in there to protect your eyes from invading bacteria. Even though your eyes are a great way of introduction of viruses and bacteria. Conjunctivitis. You ever had pink eye? You've got invaded. Mucous membranes, snot rocket. The snot locker, that's a mucous membrane. You get congested all up in there, but these are ways to capture invaders, and then you snort it out. Or if you're a baseball player or football player and you're on national TV, you will snort out one nostril at a time as the camera is on you. Skin, that's your best protection. If you don't believe that, go watch people who have had significant burns. The initial biggest risk for those folks is losing dehydration, because they lose all their fluids, but the second biggest risk is what? Infection. They die from infection, because their biggest barrier of protection is gone. Skin. Reflexes, that's an interesting thing, right? How is a reflex part of your immune system?
Viruses coming and go.
Yeah, it protects you.
Yeah, and your eyes, like you can see stuff
Yeah.
that you can't really see, but you blink from it.
Right. Smoke, something's on fire, you protect yourself. If something smells rotten, you won't eat it, right? You know why we go nose blind in our home? Because if we get used to our home smell, we'll smell something that's not supposed to be there.
Dogs.
Right, that's why we go nose blind. If you set your hand down on something hot, what do you do immediately? Take your hand off, I hope, right? And so that saves your skin, which protects your immune system, right? So your reflexes are important. Other bodily functions, so this one kind of is an other, but even bleeding, when you cut yourself and you start to bleed, the act of bleeding, it makes it hard for bacteria to swim upstream. So the bleeding out actually helps prevent bacteria from coming in, right? One of the reasons why older people get urinary tract infections, anybody know why?
Can't eliminate.
They don't pee as much because they don't drink as much. So the act of peeing, when you pee a lot, you actually keep that urinary tract free and clear from debris. When it gets dry and unused, bacteria are like, this is my pathway. I'm gonna walk right up here and I'm gonna make a bed here in this bladder and I'm gonna cause an infection. So the fact of just urinating keeps your urinary tract, keep that tract moving and flowing. It's a happy tract. Fever gets a lot of play for being bad. Oh, I've got a fever, I gotta treat it. I've seen a toddler with 103 fever walk around the room like there is nothing wrong with him. I've seen a full-grown adult with a 99.5 fever crying and asking for mama. So it's true. You're only laughing because it's true. But then eventually the toddler will feel that fever. Fevers are actually important. Anybody know when fevers generally hit?
When there's
When your immune system is reacting to it?
What time, let me rephrase the question. What time of day do fevers usually hit?
Night.
At night,
In the evenings. Why?
because I'm tired and I've been working all day and regular down.
Our circadian rhythm.
Retail.
We are coolest in the mornings. As we sleep, our body is not working, right? So we're not, our basal metabolic rate really isn't doing anything. So overnight, we're cool. Yeah.
Oh, question about why is it bad? I thought it was bad because it can kill like brain cells.
Say it again, say it
I
louder.
thought fever was bad because that can kill like brain cells or something like
If
that.
it gets too high, you can denature proteins, but that's what I'm talking about, 105, 106. That's bad. I'm gonna keep talking about fever though. So, in the mornings, we're coolest. And that's why women who are trying to get pregnant, they will measure their temperature, because right before they ovulate, they'll have a little spike in temperature. And you'll know that because you're normally cooler in the morning, so it's easy to measure that spike in temperature right before you ovulate. So, so as you go out throughout your day, your core temperature eventually rises. Why? Because what are we doing during the day? Moving and grooving, hopefully. Hopefully you're making your body work. You've eaten, you've been moving, things are happening. So your basal metabolic rate over the course of the day is headed up. So if you've got a fever, your set temperature has already been creeping up, and then the fever happens, and now you have a perfect storm. And so that's why fevers mostly happen in the evening, because your basal your normal temperature is already rising, and it meets that temperature rise that's happening. Boom, you got a fever in the evenings. Explains that, makes that make sense now, doesn't it? So, so fevers are good to a degree. Fevers help prevent replication of viruses, and it helps replication of bacteria to a degree. Fevers have to be under control. If you can't have a fever that gets too high, because that does cause denaturing of proteins. But that's a bad fever. That's a fever that doesn't respond to Tylenol. So I always tell people, when you start getting a fever, how do you know you're getting a fever? What do?
You get chills sometimes.
You chills, you shiver. That's your body making the fever. Your muscles actually quivering is how your body produces the fever. That's how you know you're getting a fever. How do you know you're breaking a fever?
You start to sweat.
You sweat like a beast, right? You can wring out your shirt. That's how you know a fever's really gone. So we'll talk about all that more. Other cells and chemicals. Inflammation.
What? Sorry, just not on the fever. Why does it like when the fever gets too high, you start getting like mentally?
Because you can cause brain swelling. That's the denaturing of proteins. If you've reached that type of fever and it's not breaking, you have to break the fever. That high of fever is not good. You cause neurological damage. Your brain is supposed to keep at a certain level. Your body will do all the things it can to reduce your temperature, and we'll get to that when we talk about fever. We'll come back to it. You had a question?
No.
All right. Inflammation. Inflammation is a huge responder of our body. We talked about multiple cells that are responsible for inflammation. What was one of those cells right off the bat? Basophils? Correct. So basophil is a cell that is responsible for inflammation. Causes vasodilation. You also have, and we're going to talk about specific signs of inflammation, which we've kind of already touched on, swelling, redness, pain. These are all signs of inflammation. Natural killer cells we've talked about. They don't have memory, but they do go around and kill things that aren't supposed to be there. Leukocytes and macrophages, we've talked about those guys, and antimicrobial proteins. Complement system, we'll talk about this more. Complement system is a really incredible system that complements our immune system. Once complement gets involved, it enhances the immune system. It's like giving the immune system backup support, and it like brings it up a notch. It's like if the immune system was a volume on a radio station. If your immune system was at a 5, when complement gets involved, it takes it up to an 8 or 9. That's what complement does. Interferons are interesting. These chemicals, if you get invaded by a virus, your cells that are getting invaded, those cells send out little chemical messengers. They go, hey, I'm getting invaded by a virus. You guys shut your cell walls down, your cellular membranes down, so the virus can't get into your cells. We think that COVID broke that signal down. And that's why COVID was able to like get into all of the cells. That's one of the ways we think COVID was able to get around our defenses so well. So let's get going. Non-specific. Innate immunity. So this is immunity that's going to be there no matter what. It's not going to have a memory of what happened the last time. The last time is the last time. But it's going to be there no matter what. Hopefully. Present at birth. Will continue to provide protection even all the way up through old age and death. It won't recognize specific invaders. It's just going to recognize an invader and attack. It is considered your first and second line of defense. Specific or adaptive immunity, now that's where we start making antibody and making memory to specific invaders. And we can have millions and millions of things in our body, antibodies and copies of cells that are there to attack specific invaders. They keep memory. And so up here, every time your innate immunity gets involved, you're going to feel sick as this process of innate immunity is fighting that illness. With specific adaptive immunity, the first time you'll get sick, the second time you won't even know. If your immune system is working appropriately, the second time your body's defenses will take care of that invasion and quell it and shut it off, and you won't even have a blip on the radar screen. You'll just be going around your day, going to get your latte, going and having a great, wonderful day, and you won't be sick. How many of you are grateful for your good health every day? Right? Like if that's not the first thing you're grateful for every day, that's where it all starts, right? Watch those immune system videos at home.
Oh, question. So how is it that, which one does COVID trigger? Because I know people who had COVID once and then they turn around and had it again.
Why? Why have they had it multiple times? What?
Mutation.
They've mutated.
So,
And so that's why the vaccines, so do vaccines prevent you from getting the illness?
No.
What do vaccines do?
lessens the severity of it.
Blunts the severity of the disease, right. That's why they've never really had, there's a couple of reasons why they've never really had an HIV vaccine, even though it's been close, but one of the reasons why is it mutates. It uses the body, each individual person's DNA, and it mutates. COVID did the same thing. So COVID mutated so quickly. I think that's one of the things that blew away the scientific community is how quickly it mutated. So when it mutates, it changes the proteins on the outside of the virus. It changes the receptors. And so there were people who decided, I'm not gonna get the vaccine, I'll get the monoclonal antibody that's a treatment. What does mono mean? You're treating that one adaptation of the virus. They spent millions of dollars for that one monoclonal antibody that just so the moment the virus mutated, that monoclonal antibody became useless. And I don't know how many versions of COVID we're up to now. I've lost track. Yeah, it's up there. I don't even know what mu 4085. Like I don't know who's naming these things. I think they're twisted, but the more people it's exposed to, the more it will continue to mutate. The more virus it gets into new people's DNA and RNA, it will mutate. It's using your personal information to propagate. And so it's gonna steal some of your information to do that. And so that's why it keeps mutating. Yeah.
So for HIV, there is a pre-exposure prophylaxis.
So that's PrEP. So that, yes. And so the PrEP that actually has become very, very, very useful in preventing, we can almost fully prevent exposure to HIV now.
Yeah, I don't know like how does that work? because a vaccine just increases like your antibodies, and you cannot do that with HIV because of the mutations. Like how does PrEP work and how?
It blocks
Goes
the,
around
it blocks the receptors, it blocks the, I don't actually know 100% how the PrEP works, but I think it blocks the receptors and the replication of HIV. There are some people who actually can't get HIV,
Can
genetically cannot get HIV, which is something that we've just now found out. Well, that's interesting in all of itself, but I'll talk about that offline. So, let's get back to this. I do want you to know, non-specific is your first and second lines of defense, and specific is your third line of defense. You will need to know that. Third, right. If it has memory, if you have memory to it, if you have memory, that means you've made antibody, you have invaders, you have defenders ready, at the ready. The moment you are exposed to that antigen, an antigen is anything that creates an immune response. Initiates that could be a peanut for some people, right? All right, surface barriers. This is your first line of defense. That's your skin. That's your mucous membranes. That is your first line of defense. They're very important. If you fall down and scrape your knee, you don't take care of it, it can get infected. If you don't take care of that infection, it can get inside your body. Then you can go septic. I've literally seen someone die from cutting their toenails and it causing an infection and dying from. I'm not kidding. It's the craziest thing. I've seen some crazy things in my time at the bedside. But also there had to be something wrong with the immune system, right? This job has made me a germaphobe, I'm not gonna lie. But it'll make you, and I'm not to the point of like being OCD about things, but it'll make you aware. I will tell you that, it'll make you aware. And at the end of the day, I don't live my life like that either. If something's gonna get me, something's gonna get me. You have to have your faith in whatever you believe in, higher power, whatever that is. I'm just not gonna worry. You can't go around living your life like that. But I respect the ability of these little things that we can't see to take me out. And so I give them their due diligence. You know what I'm saying? So, cells and chemicals, second line of defense. Leukocyte and macrophages. These are, so your macrophages come from what?
Monocytes.
Monocytes, perfect, that's right. Antimicrobial proteins, interferon. Interferon interferes with viruses and replications. Natural killer cells, especially with cancers, inflammation, and fever. We're gonna talk about that more in a minute. These guys are more, we're gonna talk about each one of them in like much more detail. This is all part of your innate immune system. Will not make memory, will react every time the same. So your skin. What is the first thing what does your skin do all the time that actually helps?
Sheds.
It sheds, it exfoliates. That's what the dust is in your house, by the way. Most of that is skin cells. I love telling that part. So, but what is actually on your skin? What do we have on what is already on your skin? Bacteria. We have so much bacteria on our skin. And it's good bacteria, actually. It's a good thing that it's there. We have good bacteria and we have bad bacteria. If you take an antibiotic because you have, this is for the women, can be for men too, but it's a lot more for women. Women, if you take an antibiotic and you're prone to these, and you take out your normal flora on your skin, what can you be prone to?
Infections.
Yeast infections. That's right. So you've taken out your normal flora, and now yeast is able to overgrow what the bacteria was able to take care of When you take out the bacteria, because you had a broad spectrum antibiotic, now yeast is able to overgrowth, and now you have to take care of that. That is what, you have healthy bacteria on your skin, it's supposed to be there. When we take antibiotics unnecessarily, which I hate that. People who come in with viral infections and someone just throws an antibiotic at it, it's not gonna do anything, but you've now just altered all the healthy bacteria that's on your body. There is bacteria for a purpose there. So you sweat, your epidermis exfoliates. Actually, I just read somewhere, this is interesting. Anybody use those puffy things to bathe with? Loofah, yeah, they say that those are actually bad for your skin. You exfoliate too much. So, I don't know. Everybody says something new every day, but skincare is important. You gotta take care of your skin. Mucosal membranes, physical barrier, again, it traps stuff. Anybody been around a smoker? What they sound like in the morning? What do they sound like in the morning?
Dark pages.
And coughing and hacking. Why? Or let me put it this way. Let me not throw any smokers under the bus. Anybody been out to a bar where they're smoking, and how does everybody feel in the morning? Do you cough up some stuff? What does smoke do to your lungs? Or what does it do?
Increase mucus.
So we're gonna talk about it, we have a lining in our lungs where we trap stuff. And overnight, we've trapped that stuff, and it actually shocks out, there's a little thing, vibrate in our lungs, and then we have to cough that up in the morning. So smoke actually causes a whole lot of problems when you do that, because we're trapping a lot of stuff in that mucosal membrane, and you'll cough it up. But like perennial smokers, they cough crap up all the time, because they've done a lot of damage to that process. Lysozymes and tears and saliva. I don't recommend licking your wounds. That's not a great idea. Or letting your dogs lick your wounds. Their mouths are not cleaner than ours. That's a falsehood. But lysozyme has antimicrobial, so your tears will keep your eyes clean. Your saliva helps keep your mouth clean. People who don't have saliva will lose their teeth. People who smoke methamphetamines, they lose the ability to have saliva, and they have breakdown on their teeth in a certain arrangement. It's up at the gum line. That's why they lose their teeth at their gum line, because they stop salivating. Saliva is very important. Hydrochloric acid is in our stomach. That's our best first line of defense against bad bugs. What is our big problem in terms of weight in this country? What do we struggle with?
Obesity.
What is a secondary effect of obesity? Anybody heard of GERD? So we treat GERD with a lot of like PPIs, proton pump inhibitors, which turns down our hydrochloric acid. So we're immediately impairing our ability to fight off norovirus, sapovirus, and all of these. And these bugs have come on kind of strong recently, and I think there's a correlation with that. I think I think people are on these PPIs for way too long. I don't think it's good for us. So, I said my story about smoking too soon. So the mucociliary escalator in the respiratory tract. So the mucus traps it, and you cough it up. This is what we do. This is in your trachea. If you were not even camping, and you started a nice little fire while you were camping to make your s'mores, you're breathing in enough stuff that irritates the lining of your trachea that you'll cough that up the next morning, right? You'll feel it in your lungs, but your trachea is catching it, and you'll cough it up. Or if you ever mowed your lawn and you didn't wear a mask, and you cough yourself, you'll catch dirt and stuff in your throat and nose the next day. That's your mucous membranes capturing. Because do you want that in your lungs?
No.
No, you do not want that in your lungs. So your mucous membranes are capturing it and then bringing it back up so you can cough it up or loogie it out. I know that's gross, but ladies, it's okay to spit that stuff out. Kids, however, will cough it up and then swallow it.
Ooh.
That's just what they do.
That's fine, right, cause the hydrochloric acid is good.
Their hydrochloric acid will kill it. That's exactly right. So if you smoke, you shut the cilia down. The cilia won't work. That's true of cigarettes, mostly true of cigarettes, but it's true, you put any heated air down in that trachea, you'll impact it. What do you call those things that people are doing now? Vaping? Vaping will definitely do that too. Vaping will shut down that cilia too. The coughing is definitely much worse with actual cigarettes. So second line of defense, phagocytosis. What does phago mean? Eat the cell. That's what phagocytosis means, eat the cell. So this is the stages of phagocytosis. So you've cut yourself. The mast cells and the basal cells have come to the defense. Your neutrophils were on site. Your platelets actually sent off the chemical signals as you were bleeding that you're going to need the immune system to come on board. It sent out like all the radio signals, so everybody's come to the defense of that area where you cut yourself. And now you have this big old macrophage there. It sees some bacteria that got through. It engulfs the bacteria, swallows it whole. In that bacteria, you have lysosome, which is an enzymatic cleaving material. It's basically like taking some of your hydrochloric acid from your stomach and putting it in a little cell. It's going to dissolve that bacteria. Once that lysosome hits that bacteria, it dissolves it in little bitty pieces, and then it's able to just basically like cellular poop it out. So it eats it, explodes it, gets rid of it. We'll talk, now that we're just talking about the second line of defense here, there's way more that happens later on, and we'll get to that. But that's what phagocytosis is. It literally eats the cell, and every time you eat, you have to poop. Same thing happens in cellular level. Neutrophils, we've already talked about this. Neutrophils target what kind of infections? Bacteria. So, when monocytes leave the circulation, so that's where our immune system travels, right? Our immune system is traveling through the blood. Without blood supply, what do you not have?
An immune system.
You don't have healing. You're right, we don't have an immune system. Without an immune system, you don't have healing. So, if you don't get the immune system there, you're definitely not going to be able to like stop an invader.
Oh, if you don't have blood, you're gonna die anyway, so.
Say it again.
If you don't have blood, you're gonna die anyway, so.
Solid point. Solid point. So when monocytes leave the circulation, they go into the who watches that pimple popper show? Ew. So what you're seeing when they pop those pimples is the result of neutrophils and monocytes that have fallen on their swords. Those are leftover white cells that have died. And you have to get that stuff out. You have to debride it and get it out so that new healthy tissue can come on along after that. But those were serious infections. They had to have been treated by some there had to be some antibiotics involved in those. If you're having to go to a doctor to get that kind of debridement happening, that was a serious infection. Also, ooh. So these guys will go into two things. A dendritic cell is an antigen-presenting cell. We're going to talk a lot more about antigen-presenting cells. I'm going to call them an APC. So when that previous slide, after that macrophage had eaten that cell, it keeps a little bit of that cell and brings it out and holds it up on the outside of this cell as an epitope. It's a little antigen, it's a little part of that invader, and that's going to hold it up to say, hey, this is the part of the guy that you need to look for, and that's for your part of your immune system that's going to come on and make memory to it. So your T cells and your helper T cells are going to come along and go, oh, that's the guy we need to look for? Thanks for letting me know. So that's what that dendritic cell is. That's an antigen presenting cell. We have a lot more of those, but that's specifically what that dendritic cell is. Macrophages, these are our cleanup guys. These are our Roombas. They're going around cleaning up. Even after infection is over and we have all this leftover detritus of infection and wounds and everything, macrophages will come along and clean it up. The eosinophils, these guys target parasites. Hence those. So there are, if you see, this is the interesting thing. So this is a helmet. But you see they have surface attachments for our eosinophils. So there's actually attachment sites on the surface of these parasites that they will attach and will then start to get in there and kill the parasite. They release these granulocytes and granules, which is what that's where the granules come into play, and then in there it starts to eat up that parasite. You think you'll feel good during that part? No, you're probably going to have some pretty bad diarrhea when that's happening. Natural killer cells. So, I'm going to tell you this, and I'm going to tell you this again multiple times. So, I write it down now, but it's going to be redundant. Natural killer cells kill the very same way T cells will kill, but they have no memory of it. They will not keep a memory of it. Once a natural killer cell engages with a cell, it releases perforin and granzyme, and it sets a cell up for apoptosis. Cell death. In this particular instance, it's a tumor cell. We're starting to get to the point where we're trying to take our immune system out and target just specific cancer cells. Chemo that we use now takes out not only the cancer cells, but healthy tissue. That's what makes people so sick. What we're trying to do now is take out our immune system and make them, and when we put them back in, we make them all little Terminators, little Arnold Schwarzeneggers that are going after just the tumor cells. They know exactly what their target is, and they're going just after that target cell. It's brilliant. Still makes people sick, and they can have reactions to it, but we're getting better. We might actually, I have two parts to that. Part of me thinks there's so much money in cancer. I know, right? It's sad that I think that, but.
No, it's true.
It's just like the bottleneck.
Just like the Ebola.
Right? Right? I don't know, whatever. Okay, complement proteins. Remember, this is the radia, the volume. If our immune system's at a 5, when complement gets involved, it's going to turn it up to an 8 or a 9. So complement is what it sounds like. It complements the immune system, and it drives a stronger reaction of our immune system. And complement can help both the innate and the adaptive immunity. That's the beauty of complement. Every time we find a complement protein, we give it a C letter, and we add a number to it. So there's C1, C2, C3, C4, C5, and we keep finding new complement. It starts a cascade. We're going to talk about that. We do a lot of cascades in our body, right? And we do those cascades so we don't want things to happen just willy-nilly. We want things, if something starts, we want it to start for a reason, and we have a start and a stop. If there's going to be a bleed, we want to have a start and a stop. If we want our immune system to get going, we want to have a start and a stop, right? Because the inflammation for no reason forever will kill you. A bleed forever will kill you. Not being able to bleed, a clot. You throw clots all around your body, that will kill you. So your body is homeostasis, right? It's all about homeostasis. If you think about, that's our body's goal, is to live in this very narrow window of happy and homeostasis. That's why we do what we do, and that's why cascades are important. So, they are produced in the liver. The liver is so important. Such an important organ. Circulate in the plasma, and they are capable of killing almost everything. Bacteria, viruses, parasites, and again, they have a little C, and they get a number in the number in which they are discovered. So you have a classical pathway of complement, and this is initiated by an antigen-antibody complex. If you have an antigen-antibody complex, that means you have memory, and that's adaptive immunity. You should write that down. A classical pathway, if you have an antigen-antibody complex, that is adaptive immunity. You can only have an antibody with adaptive immunity. That means you have memory to it. I'm going to talk about all these little sections here in a minute. Alternative pathway. This is by an abnormal pathogen or something pathogenic on the surface of a bacterial cell wall or a viral cell wall. That all by itself will create a complement. So if complement's floating around and it bumps up, it happens, if it's at a party and it bumps up against a bacteria, it's like, oh, hey, you're not supposed to be here. That can set off a complement cascade. So these little things here is what I want you to pay attention to. So C3, C4, and C8, you didn't remember this. I don't need you to remember this. But they cause, these things are gonna sound familiar. What they do sounds familiar. Dilatation of arterioles, release of histamine and mast cells, and they create a chemotaxis. What does chemotaxis mean?
Movement.
Create movement, cellular movement of phagocytes. So it sounds a whole lot like what some of our cells do, like neutrophils and basophils. So it complements what our neutrophils and basophils do, right? So all of this is something that we've heard of before, but now complement's doing it too. So it's complementing our immune system. So C3b, this is not something we've heard of before, but this is actually a really good thing that what complement does. Opsonization of the microbes promotes phagocytosis. How many people dip their chicken nuggets in ranch before they eat it? Only one? Okay, good.
Chicken
Thank you for
nuggets.
admitting it. Thank you guys are great.
Yeah.
Or they dip their vegetables in ranch before they eat it. So it's the whole idea of dipping something. I don't care. The whole idea is, that's what opsonization is. It's basically dipping whatever food product into whatever favorite dip product and making it more edible for the phagocytosis. That's what opsonization is. It's coating the antigen, whatever the antigen is, and opsonizing it for phagocytosis. It's basically marking that antigen for death. You've marked it for death. You've made it look very good for a cell that wants to come along and eat it. Okay? And then down here, we have something called a membrane attack complex. And it's going to sound a whole lot like a natural killer cell or a T cell. Because you're actually going to poke a hole in the membrane of a cell. You actually create, once you create a hole in a cell, it's all physics, right? So you have this membrane attack complex. So this membrane comes along, creates this hole. Now you have, it's a differentiation of pressure. So if there's more fluid outside the cell than inside the cell, which direction is fluid going to go? Inside the cell. What's eventually going to happen to the cell?
Burst.
Pop like a grape. And that's what happens with a membrane attack complex. Apoptosis. So that's what happens when these particular complement get involved. So again, complement is just complementing the response of your immune system. Bacterial fungal cell wall. Fungus is gonna be the thing, especially with our world heating up. Fungus is gonna be our real concern, unfortunately. And the treatment for fungus is really bad on our bodies. Antifungals are horrible to our bodies. And healthy people, generally healthy people don't have anything to worry about fungals. But people who are a little bit immune suppressed, funguses can do a number on them. And there was a fungus going around this past summer that was like not responding to our treatments, and it was hurting people. So,
I had to take a part of my intestine due to a fungus.
say it again.
I had to take a part of my intestine due to a fungus.
Yep. Fungus is a killer. Fungus is a killer. Anybody watch that show?
Last of Us.
Huh?
The Last of Us.
The Last of Us. Yeah. Anybody watch that?
Yes.
I know it's a good show. Anyway, again, effects of complement. You have. I want you to know all of these. You absolutely have to know all the effects of complement. You have to know opsonization and phagocytosis, inflammation, and cytolysis. Those are your three. These are your three choices of the effects of complement activation. You have three pathways for that. You have a classical pathway, which is an antigen-antibody complex, and you have a pathogenic surface, which is an alternative pathway. Opsonization coats it, makes it look very tasty for your macrophage. You have a lytic pathway, which will cause cytolysis. And then you have the promotion of an inflammatory response, which attracts the phagocytes. Histamine is a vasodilator and allows for more blood to flow. Here again is what opsonization looks like. Again, it just makes it more recognizable or more tasty to the phagocytes. It's like a cellular coating that says, this cell is the cell you want to come eat. Come eat this cell. So that's what opsonization and phagocytosis is. Inflammation. I can't tell you enough or address enough how important inflammation is. So inflammation works for us and inflammation works against us. For people who had COVID, especially the OG COVID in the beginning, COVID was able to turn on the inflammatory response and not turn it off. So these folks would have massive inflammation. All their vessels would vasodilate. So tell me what happens to their blood pressure if all their vessels are vasodilated.
Go down.
What is it?
Lower. Go
Yeah, no blood pressure. That's right. Now tell me what happens in their capillary beds if they're completely vasodilated. What happens to the fluid? Huh?
Oh, never mind.
All the fluid settles down to the bottom.
They have no fluid left in their vasculature. It's all in their interstitial. They have so much fluid in there. They look like the Stay Puft Marshmallow people because all their fluid is left. Their vascular system is in their interstitial. I've seen that happen so bad that their skin actually stretches to the point of breaking and it leaks serous fluid out. So now they have nothing intravascular. Their blood pressure is low. What do you think is happening to their heart? Oh, it doesn't want to work at all. I mean, they get cardiac arrest so easily. They're not oxygenating very well. This is what happens end stage when you have such an incredible inflammatory response. And so they start giving them steroids. They start trying to get their blood pressure back up. They'll give them fluid. They start trying to do everything they can to mitigate what the body's doing, but the body's kind of in its death knell. Kidneys are shut down, liver will shut down. When those things start happening, it's almost too much. Yes.
I don't know if it's off the thing, but sometimes anesthesia doesn't work on inflamed, like when they start have inflammation.
Sometimes anesthesia doesn't.
Yeah, it doesn't work.
Anesthesia should always work. Anesthesia is doing two different things. There's different pathways for anesthesia.
Just because I had a surgery and it was like a really spots, and they said that the anesthesia wasn't gonna work on the spot itself, so they had to do like a circle around it, so it wouldn't fit it.
Okay, so what that meant is they might not have been able to numb the area because of inflammation.
Yes.
So they could do a nerve block or something else. Yeah, that's different. I thought you meant general
No,
anesthesia
no,
knocking
no,
you
no,
out.
no.
So yeah, that's true. If there's inflammation in a part of the body, because that inflammation is actually, the nerves are already impacted by the inflammation, so they could do a workaround for that, that's true. But inflammation in and of itself is part of your immune system. So when inflammation happens, when you have inflammation, the endothelium of your cells actually pull apart. That's how your vessels get leaky. That's what we say, your vessels get leaky. So this endothelium right here of your blood vessels, these cells pull apart, and cells easily chemotaxis are transferred through to the interstitium out here in the where they're not supposed to be. And then complement attracts neutrophils and macrophages to the site to help destroy that pathogen, and it releases histamine. Histamine attracts it prevents the blood from clotting, so you attract more blood flow. If you attract more blood flow to an area, what happens to that area? What do you think it gets?
It gets
Warm. And what color does it get?
Red.
Red. So it gets warm and red. Because you've got an area with inflammation, what else do you think also happens to it?
It gets tender.
It's tender. That's right. So if you've ever hurt yourself, those are three cardinal signs of pain, of inflammation: warm, red, tender. That's exactly right. We'll talk about another one in a minute. So this is the cytolysis. These are your C5, 6, and 7. They all come together, so they have to work in concert together. They all by themselves, they couldn't do it. They have to work in concert. They all come together, join. They're like Wonder Twin powers activate. So they have to come together and then form that hole in the membrane of the cell. Once they form that hole, now you have created a gap into the cell wall, and now you have the fluid rushing in and you have, of the cell. Create cytolysis.
Like,
Yes.
no, I just thought that was like really cool.
Oh.
It's like them just pumping water.
Sound effects. Okay, interferon. Again, interferon is antiviral only. Interferon is antiviral only. This will be released when a viral process is going on and when viruses are replicating at a very high level. Sometimes you have dormant viruses, right? If you get a cold sore, what is that on your lip called?
Human papilloma.
Herpes.
It's herpes usually.
Simplex 2.
Yeah, it's herpes simplex 1. It's HSV 1. And then it goes away, right? Until what happens?
So it comes back.
Until you get ready to get married or have a picture made or something stupid, and then it cause because why are you what are you going through?
Stress.
And when you're stressed, what happens to your immune system?
is going down.
Yeah, your immune system gets depressed because you're so stressed, because you release cortisol. Cortisol naturally, in large quantities, will depress your immune system, and then that latent viral process will kick back up, and now you have another cold sore. Always at the worst times, right? That's why being aware of your stress really matters. So the latent viruses are very interesting to me. I have lots of questions. Yeah.
Can you transmit when it's latent or just when it's
No.
when it's
You can only transmit it when it's open in an open wound.
for all the latent virus?
All
or,
the
or
viruses,
for HPV?
shingles, anything, shingles, herpes, any of those viruses, you can only transmit it when when it's got a sore and it's got something you can touch and there's fluid on the end of it. Don't be around people when it's like that. Interferons will leave the infected cell. They're a little cellular little thing. Go next door, knock on the door, and it's like, hey, lock it down. I've been attacked. So lock it on up. Again, this is a place where now we will be learning about the COVID pandemic for years. We've only scratched the surface. People wanted answers immediately because that's the world we live in now, right? As soon as COVID hit, people, everyday people, wanted to know the answers now. And then when the answers changed, they're like, oh, well, they're lying to us. Why did the answers change?
Because the virus.
For learning.
Because we were learning. And then as we learned, we kept getting new data, so we had to change the answers again. Were we lying to people?
No. Well, some. Yes, yes. Never mind. I'm sorry.
Who was lying? I hear you. So, I'm talking about science. Let's leave all the politicians out of it. Was science lying?
No.
Because they were getting the data that they had. And unfortunately, science and politics is always married, right? Unfortunately, science gets funded through politics. That's why it took forever to get HIV, even like, a very good book is In the Band Played On. It's a very good book. They talk about epidemiology. But we are not lying to people. We learn something new, and then we adapt and we change to it. That's what it is. Like we don't have all the answers. If we had all the answers, we would all be in utopia, but we don't live there because we don't have all the answers. We get a challenge, and we have to take time. We will be learning about COVID for another decade, if not more. That's what will happen. And in that time frame, there's going to be another pandemic. I can almost guarantee you. Unfortunately. So, take your vitamins. Get a good sleep. Okay, inflammation. Mast cells detect injury, release histamine. This is right away, right? What is almost the worst cut ever?
Paper cut.
Did you say paper
Yeah, I
cut?
got one today.
Yeah. That was the fastest answer you've ever given. Yes, paper cut. Golly, they don't bleed, but they suck. So those are the worst cuts. And the best way to find paper cuts is to use hand sanitizer. We've actually changed those at work to say paper cut finders on them, because you will certainly find a paper cut with them.
Wait,
But let's say you
I thought
cut.
it was a joke.
Huh?
I thought it was a joke. Are paper cuts actually like the worst?
No, they really hurt. Because you're just getting into that, you have a lot of nerve endings on your hands. That's how you tactile stimulate. And so paper cuts really are only going right where the nerves are. They don't bleed really. They'll lay open just right where there's nerve endings are. That's why they suck. So, but this wound went into, it's gonna bleed a little bit. So you've opened up a wound, mast cells detected, and now this histamine increases blood flow. Histamine is increasing that blood flow. So you've got hyperemia to the wound site, which is great because where you have blood, you have healing, right? Allowing fluid, macrophages, all the other immune system to come to that wound. You'll have swelling, redness, and hotness, which we all agreed was part of it. And then the other thing that happens is pain. Pain is a funny thing. Pain is one of the most interesting things that we've been very bad at deducing the cause of. And treating. There was a woman in England who had a full hysterectomy without anesthesia. She was able to use breath work to get into a certain wavelength in her mind. I hear you. I hear you. I hear you. And she was able to go through the hysterectomy without any anesthesia, which is great for her because anesthesia sucks. Yeah.
During here in the United States, during social Darwinism times and forced euthanasia, they were doing hysterectomies on women without anesthesia for years and years.
Yeah, that's different. That was torture.
Yeah, no. It's,
Yeah, that,
and you're like, no. And then,
that's a different thing.
and they would say
This
that
woman
it
was.
wouldn't hurt, which is crazy.
This woman was in a Zen state. She was in a theta wave, delta wave. They had her hooked up to a machine, a BIS monitor, that let them know like where her brain was, and they would recognize the fact, and they had her on, like her heart rate was in her 60s, she was breathing fine. Like if she ever started showing signs of pain, they would have put her under. But she never showed signs of pain, because if she put herself into like her own like deep sleep state and was able to have that, I mean, that's impressive, right? So that's what I mean by pain. Like, so pain is the most subjective thing that we experience as humans. Some people can experience pain and you're like, that can't be that bad. And then there's some people who you're like, dude, you're the toughest human I've ever seen. Like, I don't know how you're not like crying right now. It is so subjective. So pain is a noxious stimulant that causes a sensation of pain. Everybody's representation of pain is so different. Now, I've had some people who I go into the room and they're, what's your pain level? 10? Out of 10? Yeah. I have a hard time believing that, personally. And then I have some people that are like, what's your pain level? It's like a 3. Are you sure? I kind of want to bump that up a little bit for you. But everybody's different. Like everybody's different. So, but pain, it can be because you actually injured the nerve at the site. It can be because the swelling is impinging on that nerve. It could be because you didn't get enough love from your mom. I'm just kidding. There's a whole lot of reasons why you have pain. Actually, there is a huge mental health component to pain, especially chronic pain. We've actually started treating chronic pain with a lot of SSRIs now. I think there's a lot of truth to that. I think a lot of, especially chronic pain, is so mental health related. There's a lot of really sad people in the world around it, and a lot of people who are very disconnected from each other. And I think whatever you're feeling emotionally, the mind, body, spirit is all connected, and if one or both or three are all broken, it will come out in your body, for sure. Fever. I'm gonna wrap it up with fever, and we'll do the rest of it on Thursday night. So, our hypothalamus deep in our brain sets our temperature. What's our normal temperature for everybody?
34.
Huh?
No, 35 Celsius.
So 98.5 is what they used to say was a normal temperature. I think this is probably when we were outside more.
Yep.
Now, I don't think that's our normal set temp anymore. I think 97.9, 98 might be more it. Do you take temperatures in the office?
Mhm.
What is everyone's normal temp?
97.3, 97.7.
Yeah, it's not 98.5 anymore. And I think it's because we're more sedentary. I think it's because we're not outside as much. So if you think about people even 60, 70 years ago, what were we doing more of then? Farming. We got up when the sun came up, we went to bed when the sun went down. You were outside, you were working all day, you were doing stuff. What are we doing nowadays?
On our phones.
We're gonna end up evolutionary wise with the longest thumbs in the history. I don't think we're gonna look cute.
And hunchback.
And hunchback, right? So, I think that's the reason why, I think that's an evolutionary change. I really do. I think it's a part of our basal metabolic rate just dropping. And I think that's another reason also why our weight has increased as a nation. If your basal metabolic rate is your fire, it's your furnace. If your furnace is burning lower, you're not burning as many calories. So if you think about that, is 2,000 calories a day really what it should be for everybody?
No.
Probably not. It's probably too many. You're probably not burning that many. If your set temperature is 97.5 degrees, you probably need maybe 1,600 calories, maybe 1,800 calories is enough. You know what I'm saying? There's a correlation with all this. Anyway, your hypothalamus sets the temperature. We already talked about that circadian rhythm. you get a fever, bacteria can release, it can release toxins in your blood. Those toxins get up there in your brain, and that will reset your temperature. Viruses, just the fact that you're immune, that inflammatory response will get up into your brain, and your brain will, in response to that inflammatory response, go, I'm gonna go ahead and reset my temperature. And it's going to do that in correlation with your circadian rhythm. It will cause the fever. Again, the fever is going to start out with chills. Everyone's response to that is to put on 14 blankets, which will enhance the fever. And then it breaks and everyone throws everything off. But it stimulates, it will kill the pathogens. It actually stimulates your white cells to go kill more things. So don't give it a little. I tell people don't start treating fevers until they get over 100.5. Make it to 100.5 and then start giving yourself some Tylenol. Then you can treat it. If you've had head trauma and your brain swelling, sometimes you get a fever that Tylenol or ibuprofen will do nothing about. We've had to soak those people, we have to put like a thing underneath them and cool them that way. So that's it. Let's go down, let's take a break.